time for perspective on the programme. And as a human being, if you're asked what is the one thing you need that you just cannot live without, well, the answer should be, I guess, either air or water. Well, for most of us, air is not in short supply. But as for water, well, it's not necessarily the case. Wilson Atumeyi grew up in an area of Nigeria where every day he and his classmates would often be sent to fetch water from miles away just to survive. And it's obviously stuck with him because he is now founder and chief executive officer of WaterWide. It's an NGO that aims to solve water sanitation. He's also campaigned on many other issues, including corruption and women's rights. And he joins us now from Abuja. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme, first of all. I'd like to start off talking a bit about your childhood. I mean, tell us what you used to do going back all those years ago in order to get water.
Okay, so I was in a secondary school, a boarding school, where we didn't have access to safe water and sanitation facilities. We had to go deep down to a place where we call forest, where farmers actually dug borehole wells for their farms. Obviously, the water is not pure; it's not even clear. It's not safe for consumption, but that is the only access to safe water that we had. So we even still had to have farmer-students clash because we are not allowed to fetch from that source, but that's the only source that is close to us. So accessing that water was, first of all, risky to our lives and because of the farmers. Then secondly, the water is not safe enough for consumption. So for me, it was like a challenge for me to do something to ensure that students like me in the future don't have access to that, don't have that same challenge that I face as a student.
Yeah, it obviously felt very wrong listening to what you're saying to you, and it stuck with you as well, hasn't it, that?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
It obviously felt very wrong to you, that, and it stuck with you.
Yeah. It was very wrong for me. I mean, having experienced that when I was just 10 years old down to when I was 15, 16. So it kept following me all through my university days. And when I graduated, I felt the need to help people. But when initially it was more like, let me raise money and dig boreholes and wells in rural communities. Then I found out that there are billions set aside for water projects in Nigeria and across Africa and the world. But these funds don't usually get to these target communities because they are usually lost to corruption. That's the bet of WaterWide. So I was like, what? Instead of using hundreds of thousands to sink one borehole in one community, why don't I use that hundreds of thousands to track several boreholes across several communities, since there are funds set aside for this project?
So what do you feel you've been able to achieve with WaterWide? What aims have you had and what have you actually been able to do?
Yeah, greatly we have tracked over 500 million naira for water projects across Yobe, Plateau State, Abuja, and Bauchi State too. And I mean, people now have access to safe water and sanitation facilities in communities that we have successfully tracked projects.
And do you feel that, I mean, since those days when you were having to go so far to get water yourself, I mean, do you feel the situation has at least improved from when you were young?
Yes, it has improved so far. The government and private institutions and other development partners have felt the need to improve access to safe water in communities and in schools like that. And organizations like WaterWide are also ensuring that projects that monies that are set aside for projects in these schools, communities, or primary health care centers reach the target communities.
Yeah, there's one community you're particularly proud of helping, the town of Tika, a town of 2,000 people.
Yes. So Tika community was a community. It was during COVID-19. Our attention was drawn to that community, and we went to the community and actually didn't have access to safe water facilities. And I mean, there was a very big overhead tank that was constructed by the government, and according to them, after I think it's just like less than 6 months, everything stopped running. They did not even commission that water. So we decided to start a campaign to ensure that these people have access to safe water. And I mean, COVID-19 is like a worse challenge. People need access to water, safe water, running water, and soap to ensure to combat the spread of COVID-19. So after several online advocacies and targeting relevant stakeholders, I mean, we got a response from the Minister of State for FCT, and they dug a borehole in that community.
And campaigning's really become a big thing for you now, isn't it? But you broadened it out, you mentioned it earlier on, the corruption thing is also something that you're trying to fight.
Yes. Corruption is like the biggest worm that eats through every sphere of the community here. And water and sanitation facilities, water and sanitation projects is not let aside. The water sector is not set aside. So yeah, we actually, in fact, we train young persons to ensure that they are able to track these funds. So it's not in isolation of WaterWide alone. We build the capacity of young Nigerians across several communities so that once they see that there is a project that is upcoming in their community, they are able to ask questions. They are able to write an FOI to the implementing agency to ensure that this fund set aside for this project gets to the target community and it's finished according to the bills and quantity and the project's timeline.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the youth there. I mean, you've become a real sort of champion for the youth as well. I know that you were Advocate of the Year 2020 in the Africa Youth Award. I mean, do you feel that that's where the future lies, trying to get young people engaged? And how difficult is it to get young people engaged in these kind of fights?
Yeah, so Africa is like, Africa has a very large youthful population, and I believe that if young persons key into governance and governance processes, I mean, we are going to tackle corruption. It's not easy getting young persons, every young person to, young people to dive into this cause and demand accountability, because for them, you can't fight the government. But we have a very large number of population of the youths that feel after proper sensitization, proper education, proper capacity building, they now plug into this. So for us, it's like when we call out for 1,000 youths or call out for 500 youths to train, we visually put our expectations to, if it's 1,000, we'll say, oh, at least 200 people or 150 people would take responsibility, would do something great. And for us, that number is a great number, because if you are able to impact 150 people and that 150 people are able to impact just two persons, I mean, the number is growing largely. So yeah, we know that there is very mistrust between young persons, citizens, and the government, and they don't trust the government. But what do we do to get these people to trust the government? We need to make the government be accountable, be transparent. And this can only be done if young persons across Nigeria and Africa and across the world engage in governance and governance processes.
Good to hear your inspiring message today. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme. Wilson Atumeyi joining us there from Abuja. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
The main headlines for you then.